welcome to my first official YouTube video. I'm a little nervous, I'm a little excited, I've had some practice, but we're gonna start with kind of a read aloud. And it's a special read aloud for me and for teachers everywhere because it's a book that we kind of like to use all the time to introduce this word yet. So I have this paper right here that talks about the power of yet. We're gonna read a story that kind of teaches us what that means. So we're gonna be reading from this book called Giraffes Can't Dance. You've probably read it before. I know a lot of you read it in previous years. So even if you've heard the story, I encourage you to listen again because sometimes when we read things over and over, we find some things that we didn't see before. What I like about this book is it has like a really important message to the story, and we'll kind of talk about it. So it is called Giraffes Can't Dance, and it's by Giles Andrade and Guy Parker Reese. Gerald was a tall giraffe whose neck was long and slim, but his knees were awfully crooked, and his legs were rather thin. He was very good at standing still and munching shoots off trees, but when he tried to run around, he buckled at his knees. So one thing that I'm noticing about the story is that there's rhyming verses at the end of every line. What's cool about rhyming verses is it makes it very easy for people to read and kind of tell the story that's going on. Now, every year in Africa, they'd hold a jungle dance where every single animal turns up to skip and prance. This year, when the day arrived, poor Gerald felt so sad because when it came to dancing, he was really very bad. So I have a connection to this story already because I've definitely gone through some things where I'm not as good as everybody else. And that always kind of makes us feel uncomfortable. So we're going to kind of see how Gerald kind of battles that problem that he's going through. The warthogs started waltzing and the rhinos rocked and rolled. The lions danced a tango that was elegant and bold. Another great thing about the story is just kind of the attention to detail that the pictures have. Really love the way the lions are shown that they tango. I think it's just a really fun, interesting story. The chimps all did a cha-cha with a very Latin feel, and 8 baboons then teamed up for a splendid Scottish reel. Gerald swallowed bravely as he walked toward the floor, but the lions saw him coming and they soon began to roar. "Hey, look at clumsy Gerald," the animals all sneered. "Giraffes can't dance, you silly fool. Oh, Gerald, you're so weird." Now, I think it's important that Gerald already kind of knew that he was different and he kind of tried to overcome that fear, and he was brave, right? He was brave because he knew he was different and he knew he kind of struggled with walking around and stuff, so he tried something else. What ended up happening was the kind of circle of people around him didn't open up to him. They didn't really listen. They didn't really want him here. So I think that's kind of where our story takes a turn, and that's where Gerald is kind of maybe going to start having some self-doubts. I mean, I can have some connections here where I've been made fun of for things that I do. So I am already making a prediction that he's not going to feel so great. Another thing that it says Giraffes Can't Dance, which is the title of the book, which I thought was interesting. Gerald simply froze up. He was rooted on the spot. "They're right," he thought. "I'm useless. Oh, I feel like such a clot." So he crept off from the dance floor and started walking home. He'd never felt so sad before, so sad and so alone. Some things that I do want to point out with our text right here. So this is the text where he is thinking in his head, and if you can kind of see there, the letters look different. They look different because those are kind of showing that that's what he's thinking, and it's also reinforced by his face right there. He looks stunned and kind of horrified. Another thing that I also noticed is right here that you can tell that he's really sad. He's sad with his head down. So these are all kind of things that I can empathize with, meaning I know how he's feeling and I can see that he's not feeling well. So it depends on what happens next and how people react to how people are feeling. Then he found a little clearing and looked up at the sky. The moon could be so beautiful, he whispered with a sigh. Excuse me, copped a cricket who'd seen Gerald earlier on, but sometimes when you're different, you just need a different song. So I think this is kind of where the story starts to take a turn, because we have a new character introduced that's going to kind of maybe help Gerald out, and he sees something good in Gerald that we want to kind of explore a little bit more. Listen to the swaying grass and listen to the trees. To me, the sweetest music is those branches in the breeze. So imagine that lovely moon is playing just for you. Everything makes music if you really want him to. So right here we do have this person coming in and making Gerald feel better and using his difference as an advantage and trying to help him become successful. And that's a good friend to have around. With that, the cricket smiled and picked up his violin. Then Gerald felt his body do the most amazing thing. His hooves had started shuffling, making circles on the ground. His neck was gently swaying, and his tail was swishing round. He threw his legs out sideways and he swung them everywhere. Then he did a backward somersault and leapt into the air. I have another connection to this because this image right here is also on the cover, which I think is cool how the authors kind of incorporate the cover into the story. Gerald felt so wonderful. His mouth was open wide. I am dancing. Yes, I'm dancing. I am dancing, Gerald cried. So I read the story multiple times and I kind of just noticed something as I'm looking at this page. So I see Gerald kind of takes up the whole page, right? But if you look really, really closely, there's some animals coming in. We got some of those animals who, at the beginning of the story, kind of shut Gerald down, and now I see them kind of in the background, so I'm going to see what happens next. Then, one by one, each animal who'd been there at the dance arrived while Gerald boogied on and watched him quite entranced. They shouted, "It's a miracle! We must be in a dream! Gerald's the best dancer that we've ever seen!" So it's also important too to notice that they kind of know that Gerald, they had been rude to Gerald, and now they've seen that he's kind of changed around, and they really seem to be celebrating him for that, which is a great thing to see. How did you learn to dance like that? Please, Gerald, tell us how. But Gerald simply twirled around and finished with a bow. It's funny here too with the details. So there's a bunch of flowers on the ground where Gerald was. That's what happens when people finish performances. They get flowers thrown at them. Thought it was a cool detail. Then he raised his head up and looked up at the moon and stars above. We all can dance, he said, when we find the music that we love. So we're going to go kind of back to what we started at the beginning of this video, the power of yet. So what's going on with Gerald in the story is he's not good at dancing yet. So all he had to do was find his own music, his own way to do things. Sometimes we can't do things the way that other people want us to do. So we have to look for ways to kind of accommodate and help us out. So that's the power of yet. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching. I'm going to be kind of adding some things here. What I want you to do is shoot me a comment or a text. And that is Giraffes Can't Dance. Kind of going back to our original message is the power of yet. So we were talking about how Gerald can't dance yet. He can't do the things that everybody else is doing because he doesn't have the correct tools to use them. So I kind of challenge you to think about some things that you might not be good at yet. But You're never not good at something. You just need to work a little bit harder and maybe a little bit differently, right? Gerald wasn't good at dancing and he didn't become an amazing dancer. What he did was he found a different way to look at dancing. He listened to the moon rather than the other music that people were talking about. So I want you to think about it, and I would love to add all your things that you're not good at yet. All right? Thank you so much for joining in. Stay tuned, and maybe there will be another video soon. Bye, everybody.